Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about libertarianism. It's selfish. Libertarianism, like most political philosophies, is an old house with many rooms. For the purposes of this video, I'll be limiting myself to libertarianism as it is most commonly found in American politics today. Consequentialist, capitalist, and individualist in character. The defining characteristic of this form of libertarianism is selfishness. Libertarian thinkers and politicians, note the distinction, are capable of reciting some very impressive sounding rhetoric about individual liberty and freedom of association, but it all reduces to this: I want to be left alone, and I want things my own way. Just think how many resentful 5-year-olds are libertarians without even realizing it. It alienates.
So are libertarians selfish? Well, everybody is selfish. Everybody wants things for themselves. Um, if you could get paid more, if you could have a higher salary, wouldn't you want that? If you could have $1 million, wouldn't you want $1 million? Isn't everybody perfectly selfish? Doesn't everybody want things for themselves? What does that even mean? Um, I think that Walter Block has a good riposte to this, which is, why is it selfish for me to want to keep my entire paycheck, but not selfish for you to want to have some of my paycheck? Ayn Rand wrote a very powerful essay entitled Selfishness as a Virtue, in which she extolled the virtue of selfishness. And I think that people who argue against selfishness haven't really made a strong case as to what is the difference between selfishness or self-interest. If I go to work for a day in order to earn money for myself or for my family, is that a bad thing? Am I being selfish? I'm doing something to benefit me or my family, but I'm also, I mean, that's clearly a good thing, right? Nobody's arguing against the concept of work, aside from maybe some people over at anti-work. I think if we look at it at a more theoretical level, let's imagine 5 people organize themselves together, engage in labor, and produce some wealth. Then who should have that wealth? Is it selfish for those 5 people to think that they alone should have that wealth because they created it? Let's imagine it on an even simpler level. If an artist creates a sculpture, who then should own the sculpture? Is the artist selfish for wanting to keep the sculpture, to own the product of their labor? I think the only rational answer is yes, it's selfish and selfishness is good, or what there's some other definition of selfish. Um, it's no, it's easy to conceive of situations where enriching yourself is immoral. If a robber robs a 7-Eleven, then that's an occasion of selfishness, which we could all condemn. So using coercion to enrich themselves at another's expense. So when selfishness is satisfied through plunder or through coercion, then certainly that's morally objectionable. But the beauty of the capitalist order is that the only way to legally satiate your selfishness is through producing for others. That is, it's not through the baker's benevolence that we get bread, but through his own enlightened self-interest.
People from the government. Libertarians have all sorts of ominous sounding ways of referring to the government: the beast, Big Brother, the state with the S capitalized to look extra totalitarian. Most, if not all, libertarians view the government as the enemy of the people. It's written and spoken of as though it were some malevolent alien that has attached itself to our civilization, from whose tentacly clutches we must all constantly struggle to escape. But the thing is, a constitutional, democratically empowered government, like the one we have in the United States, doesn't have to be the enemy of the people. It can actually be the most powerful and effective tool of the people. Unfortunately,
Can it? Has it ever historically? The state is a criminal organization. It is a criminal conspiracy on the part of the political class to loot and exploit the economic class. How can you look at the state as it exists today and imagine it as anything else? It takes incredible naivete to turn your back on the naked reality of what's really happening, of all of the parasitic redistribution of wealth, taking from those who create, those who labor, those who work, in order to subsidize the affluent lifestyles of the political elite, those who do not work but live solely at the expense of others.
most politicians with libertarian leanings seem like they would rather sabotage the government than work to make it better and more effective, which is really
But if the purpose of the state is to rob us, do we want it to be more effective at robbing us?
shitty to those of us who agree with Abraham Lincoln on the whole of, by, and for the people thing. It's anachronistic.
The state is not of, by, and for the people. That's marketing. The state is a criminal organization. Democracy is just a means of rationalizing the overt criminal nature of the state. The state uses coercion as a means of obtaining revenue, just like any criminal organization.
Most of the major expansions and reforms of government that libertarians resent and wish to dismantle, the Federal Reserve, Social Security, Medicare, the Civil Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, etc., were brought about because there was a recognized need for them. Societies grow and evolve, and so do the needs and interests of their members. Even so, many libertarians often express a desire to roll things back to how they were once upon a time, in some cases all the way back to the day of the Founding Fathers. And this is perfectly understandable as I see it, because you would have to go back that far to find a point in American history where their ideas would have formed the basis of a sound political system.
I don't think you have to go all the way back to 1776. Really, up until the 20th century, the United States was broadly libertarian. I've had to point to an era, the post-Civil War era, was a time of sound money, of fairly limited government, and rapid economic growth. Wages were increasing rapidly. Total production was as well. Even had conditions of steady deflation, which was nice.
Rather than a failed and useless ideology. It puts on airs. I'm an atheist, and I know as well as anyone that we can be some condescending bastards when we want to be. But let me tell you something. When it comes to intolerable smugness, an atheist has got nothing on a libertarian. Unless the atheist in question happens to be a libertarian, which is not uncommon. Look, the point is this. Many libertarian politicians and commentators like to cultivate this image of intellectual superiority for themselves and their political philosophies. Unlike, say, liberals or non libertarian conservatives, a libertarian roots his ideals firmly in the soil of reason. Libertarians are not swayed by appeals to emotions. They care not for what is popular or fashionable or empathetic or humane or fair or. Look, you get the idea. The point is, they're above all that. Which brings me to the last stupid thing I'll mention about libertarianism. It's naive. Yes, besides being outdated and buffoonishly pompous, libertarianism is also inescapably naive, since it assumes that, given maximum personal and economic freedom, individuals would just sort of work out an ideal or at least improved society for themselves. Never mind that democratic government represents an attempt to do exactly that sort of thing. Suppose not everyone in this minimally governed free market society was all.
No, it doesn't. That is not at all the purpose of democratic government. The purpose of government is so that one class can live parasitically, exploitatively off another. The purpose of democratic government is to provide a a an appearance of legitimacy so that the criminal undertaking can continue.
all that ethical. Suppose, and I know this is hard to imagine, but bear with me, that those with the most wealth and resources decided that their private interests were more important than those of other individuals or of society as a whole. Libertarians will often caricature government in exactly this way.
But that's the whole point, is that in the market economy, it doesn't matter. The only way to obtain more wealth is to produce a good that somebody wants to buy. The robber baron era is complete proof of this. I wish he'd make an argument instead of posting a meme, because that whole time period was A, it was libertarian, and B, conditions for people were improving quite rapidly. We had unprecedented economic growth, unprecedented increases in wage rates, and yes, some people got extremely wealthy, but conditions were improving very rapidly for the poor, for the working class. Critics of libertarianism often believe that just because a company becomes very rich or very powerful, that they can abuse that power. But the reality is, in the market economy, corporations are forced to serve their customers, and if they do a worse job than other firms, it doesn't matter how big they are, they can fall like that, and we've seen that throughout the ages.
Way, describing it as the powerful living off of the powerless with no concern for the welfare of those they exploit. And yet, the alternative that libertarians propose to this, which in their bitterness over having been born as members of a social species they perceive as tyranny at the hands of government, is something that amounts to tyranny at the hands of unaccountable.
Wrong, false, completely wrong. In the market economy, interactions are inevitably mutually beneficial. Either, look, I mean, a company can either employ you or sell you a product, both of which require your consent, both of which are going to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, you wouldn't participate in the exchange. Individuals, um, in a market economy, virtually every exchange is mutually beneficial. This is because people wouldn't trade if they didn't expect to benefit, and they are experts in what will benefit them because they've got a lifetime of experience trying to achieve their various ends with their various means. So the market economy is really just a series of mutually beneficial exchanges between individuals. It's win-win. By contrast, with the state, interactions can be and usually are win-lose, where one party benefits at another's expense. But this is not the case in the market economy. If any purchase you make, you're making because you expect to benefit. Any time you trade your labor, you're trading. You value the money you're receiving more than the just utility of the labor, more than the value of what else you could have done with your time, and your employer values your labor more than the money because they need your labor for to work in their business. So to simply equate the market economy with the state and say, oh look, they can both be equally bad. No, absolutely they cannot, because companies exist within the spectrum of voluntarism. They all they do is offer to make exchanges with people, and that's the fundamental difference between companies and the state. And that's why libertarianism is the correct answer, is because with the state, there's no such protection. The state can and does act unilaterally without consideration for the harm it inflicts. And that's the key distinguishing factor, and why people who equate state abuses with corporate abuses are just wrong.
Magnates. Minimum government, maximum freedom to those who can afford it. The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.
Yeah, this guy's an idiot. None of his criticisms were interesting, novel, or accurate.